Hey Em, good morning. How are you doing today? That's nice to hear. So, today is the 29th of September, 2018. It's almost the end of 2018. Amazing. It's going to be 2019 soon. Fall is well underway, and actually did buy a costume for Halloween. Remember, I'm going to be one of Robin Hood's merry men, and I did swing by one of those Halloween spirit places, and I did pick up a costume. And what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to take that manufactured costume and I am going to sew a replica of the costume. And I think I'm going to sew it out of like a leather fabric material that I can get at Walmart or Joann's Fabric and Craft Store in Santa Maria. So I think I'm going to do something like that. And then once I have created my own garment from using my sewing machine, then what I can do is I can add accents to the garment. I can add pockets, add straps, add buckles, and some decorative items. And you know what? I need to start doing that fast because Halloween is coming very soon, October 31st. It's essentially the end of September now. And so I need to giddy up and start moving on that project. I've been busy most of yesterday and today because I've been preparing for a visit from a friend. And it's kind of interesting how vigorously I'm cleaning the house. Now, I often clean the house just before company arrives. And my standards, I guess, are really high when it comes to that. I'm working in the bathroom and cleaning the floors and doing the windows and adjusting this and adjusting that. It makes me wonder why I don't do this every day for myself. Why is it that I wait until company comes to tidy up to the degree that I tidy up this time? In fact, I think there's really no other reason for me to tidy up my home that is as powerful as having a guest come over. That might be, most of the motivation. Wouldn't it be great if I could make this some kind of routine activity and I'd be able to enjoy a clean household? I mean, a super clean household more often. Well, the trade off is time and energy. It takes a lot of time to pull together a household and make it look nice especially when you're focused on some of the nitty-gritty details, like making sure that the surfaces that are above head height have been polished, surfaces that are normally hidden from view or are polished and cleaned, and making sure that even the cracks between the cushions on the sofa are vacuumed out. How often, I mean, I don't, only if it becomes a problem or something I notice do I sort of vacuum under my sofa cushions. I end up vacuuming under there maybe once every 3 to 6 months or so. I don't have a planned frequency for that kind of cleaning. You know, I don't know. How often do you clean under your sofa cushions? It's not part of my house that I spend a lot of time thinking about, honestly. I'm thinking about deadlines, like about work and about developing a circle of friends, not the bottom of my sofa cushions. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting the imperative we as humans have on cleanliness at all. I like to see order in a household. To me, that's a really big part of enjoyment living in a household. I guess I tend to be rather organized, particularly when I have control over a space. And one of the key tricks that I use to organize and control my space is just a visual inspection. There's something about a visual inspection. In fact, a lot of information I get about how well something is cleaned or what I need to do next is received through a visual cue. It's these cues that I pay attention to that trigger my memory and trigger my action to move forward on cleaning one thing or another, or as a reminder for one thing or another. When I leave a room, one thing I do is I scan the surfaces. I make sure that the bed has been made. I make sure that the surfaces are clear and uncluttered. I make sure that there's nothing on the floor. And it's really that last visual inspection before I leave a room that I think really helps me pull together a household to make it orderly. I'm looking for it's that visual information about whether something is organized or not. I pretend that I might be someone else looking at this room for the first time. And I ask myself, where would my eyes dart? Where would they go? They'd probably go to something complex, something piled up, something scattered, and I use that information to help me with my housework. Pretty funny stuff. Yeah. Well, since today is the 29th of September, I suggest that we read Peaceful Living, the book by Mary McKenzie. Something that is my tradition, right? So let's get started with that. So the passage today, the quotation for it is this: "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." Buddha. I like that. And that is so true. Let me respond to that quote. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. Yeah. So, how do we alleviate hatred? I know that when I'm feeling angry about something, I spend a lot of time dwelling on it to solve it like it was a problem, And I don't think that works. I think quite often what happens when a person dwells on what makes them upset is that they get even more upset. And quite often in life, there are things that happen that aren't necessarily, they might be a problem, but they're nothing that can be solved. It might be that something took place in the past, and when something sort of vanishes out of your control in the past, there is nothing to do except acceptance. There is nothing possible to do. The past is the past. The past is immutable. It's unchangeable. In fact, we are powerless over the past. We only have power over the present. And, we can anticipate by doing a little bit of planning for the short-term the short-term future. But the future is equally out of our control. Yeah, certainly the distant future. Just no control at all about the distant future. So, you know, it's kind of, so I guess my point is that when I'm angry or upset, dwelling on the anger or upset often doesn't work. In fact, quite often makes it worse. And for that reason, I'm very skeptical about this, what I'd call this hydrology theory of emotion, right? Where managing emotion, the theory is that managing emotions well, it has to do with expressing it and talking about that emotion. And you know what? There's a lot of value and insight that can be gained from talking about emotion and expressing it. Absolutely. Very valuable. And I know that there's a cathartic response. There's often ease, that happens after you've communicated what's bothering you. Though I would caution anyone to think that actually solves a problem. Unless the person who needs understanding gets that understanding from another individual. Otherwise it does tend to be rather cathartic, and the problem may still exist. And and like I mentioned, acceptance may be the only answer. And the fact is that when you relate a story about what's bothering you, quite often you're relating an image, right? You're relating a picture of what you imagine is true. And every time you repeat that picture of what you imagine is true, you are inadvertently reinforcing that picture and essentially reinforcing whatever it was that made you upset. You're reinforcing that point of view. You're reinforcing that attitude. And really, if a person wants to get away from being upset, I think it's better to focus on acceptance and probably anything else through distraction, and also reframing, right? Quite often, what acceptance really is just sort of recognizing that from another point of view, from another standpoint, in different lights, the same situation looks differently. Acceptance is quite often just a matter of changing perspective and sort of applying more energy to the alternate perspective, one that is a little bit more calming. That's the thing about life, and that is that there are good points and bad points about every situation. And what determines those good and bad points are the values that you focus on in the moment. Now, how many values does one person have? How many perspectives does one person have? I claim an infinite number. That's right. In fact, a person can, I'm just crossing my legs, a person can even value conflict. You're asking, Miguel, how does a person value conflict? Well, you can value conflict by the fact that it brings information to the fore, that it lets you know about other people's preferences, that you get insight into their negotiating style, that you find out what's really important to you and another person. Conflict can create transformation. Conflict, there are a lot of reasons that a person might value conflict. In fact, I I look at like profile people's descriptions. Sometimes I know they think of themselves as like honest and truth telling, right? You know, there are a lot of people who focus on truth at any cost, right? It's I think these people who tend to value conflict more than others. And you know what? I know it's odd to say, but conflict can be fun. There are people who become lawyers and debate, people who are interested in debate in college and on high school debate teams. These are people who enjoy the thrill of argument. And you know, when I was a kid, I enjoyed the thrill of argument too. You know, when you're in conflict with someone, when you're arguing with someone, that's exciting for a lot of people. You know, you're using all of your mind to come up with alternative arguments, convincing arguments. You know, you're wrapped up in developing lines of thinking and evidence to support those lines of thinking. It's exciting. It's a creative endeavor. In fact, when people are in conflict, they also tend to, you know, sort of strengthen their ability to strengthen certain virtues like patience or rationality, or they strengthen virtues like self-discipline, right? Conflict can be a source of transforming energy that can change a person, really can change a person. I know that there are people who say that like cancer is the best thing that ever happened to them. You know, I think they can rightly say that because, well, maybe they learned to find assertiveness. They uncovered that in their personality and they hadn't had before. Maybe they also uncovered new meaning to their lives. They figured out what their life was all about and what they truly wanted. You know, it helped them achieve their goals more rapidly, right? They became courageous and heroic. You know, that was the result of having cancer. Maybe they learned about the medical system and how to navigate the the nurses and the doctors and basically just navigate the medical system itself. So really, conflict and what I'd call maybe misfortune can be helpful. And you know, that is a reframe. So now getting back to the subject, the Buddha talked about how hatred only breeds hatred. And I think that this is true. That really only love, acceptance, forgiveness, compassion, empathy, peace can really bring back the mutuality that people are desiring. And, you know, I think it's important that people not dwell too much on the thing that makes them upset. I would rather they dwell on solutions to sort of reduce the risk that something like this might happen again, or reduce the chances that there will be problems in the future, or, you know, maybe maximize the benefit of the current conflict. And you know, conflict, here I am getting on this alternate idea about how conflict can be good. I think there is a benefit sometimes in having conflicts run over long periods of time. And the reason is because learning takes place during conflict. And if a conflict is resolved too quickly, the lessons might not be learned from the conflict. You know, that's a real risk. You know, conflicts that resolve themselves too quickly, people do not learn lessons about improving their behavior and improving their thought process. And so there are good conflicts out there that are valuable, important, and challenging. And having that conflict resolve itself too quickly can be a problem. What it does, it would prevent a person from developing behavior that would be effective in their lives. So, anyway, I think that's an interesting point. Now, getting back to what the Buddha has said, I keep straying from the Buddha's point. But the Buddha's point is simply this: it's that what resolves conflict is, quite often not a rational approach, although sometimes it is just pure rationality. But I think an attitude of love can be very helpful. You know, when you show someone that even despite the conflict, you can be friends and that you can sort of fight that conflict using, according to values and according to rules that honor and respect the other person and their points. If you, that can be a very confidence building engagement. Yeah. So, there are destructive things about conflict, of course. And I'm thinking in particular about conflict that breeds force and fraud as a result. Those elements of conflict are destructive, and, ruling them out early is really important. Developing just that foundation of trust and mutual understanding can be really helpful to prevent a conflict from deteriorating into something worse, right? Something where it's impossible for both parties to win. That's what you want. You want a win-win situation. And unfortunately, force and fraud prevent win-win situations from happening in negotiated solutions. Yeah. So anyway, that was my response. My 20-minute response to that single quote by the Buddha. So in a nutshell, my thought is to sort of separate yourself from the angry thinking and ask yourself, how can I reframe this conflict in a different way? And then the fear and isolation that often results from conflict might be less of a problem. It might be, less influential. And, you might actually enjoy the conflict a little bit. All right. So, let's see what Mary McKenzie has to say about this quote. The subtitle of her contribution is Peace Makes Peace. Many people think they can force others into compliance. This is often the philosophy behind one country attacking another, or one person overpowering another. We think that might is the best way to force people into submission. Conquering a person or other people may lead to momentary compliance, but it never results in long-term peace. Never. Centuries of warfare have proven this. Violence does not stop violence. Hatred does not stop hatred. In fact, they are fuel for more violence and hatred. If you want peace, you must first be peaceful, even if others are violent. If you want love, you must be loving, even when other people are hateful. It is the paradox of humankind. When people and nations understand this, we will have worldwide peace. I suggest that we start with ourselves. If you want peace in your family, live peacefully. If you want harmony at work, conduct business harmoniously. I predict that after some time, you will feel the effects of this shift in consciousness. And the thought for the day is, make a commitment to live peacefully today in all of your actions. Yeah. So I especially like about this passage the first sentence. Many people think they can force others into compliance. Okay. Well, let's set the record straight. There's always a consequence, and it's usually a very negative consequence to even attempting the force of compliance. Forcing someone to comply. Yeah. Yeah. Any compliance action that isn't the result of an agreement between two parties, a reasonable, rational agreement between two parties, is doomed to long-term failure. And you know what? Let me tell you, the short-term benefits are only, to say, using force are only momentary. Maybe a few seconds, maybe a few days, or even just a few weeks. But there's always a price to pay. And it can, and the price can be worse. The price to pay could be worse than any benefit gained in the short term. You know, that's the thing about human beings. Yeah, you might be able to get temporary compliance. Slavery existed for 400 years, I suppose, or 400 years ago. I forget what it was. It actually probably existed for millennia. And even though slavery's been banned in many countries in the United States, including the U.S., we are still suffering the consequences of decades and decades and centuries of slavery. The consequences are still reverberating all over the world in all of our societies. It's continual. And, so that tragedy, even though there's less or nearly no slavery of at least certain kinds in the world today, we're still feeling the after effects of what happened hundreds of years ago. And I don't expect these reverberations to go away anytime soon. They will be continual. And really, they are a kind of a reminder about how threats of force don't work. They certainly don't work in the long term. And the short-term gains probably weren't worth it. There's a lot of aggravation and discord associated with deciding to use force. And it's never a good idea. Anyway, that's my perspective. Yeah. Memories run long. People remember. At least in some way, I think they remember. And that's just part of what makes force so dangerous. Any kind of force. Anyway, so let's see. Was there anything else that I wanted to bring out? Violence does not stop violence. Hatred does not stop hatred. In fact, they fuel more violence and hatred. If you want love, you must be loving even when other people are hateful. So that's the key right there. I mean, that's the point. What is stopping you from being more loving than you are today? In a way, you owe it to yourself to be more loving to those around you, because quite often you're the one who benefits. And anyway, I can keep on going. So let me take some time out and read the book My Big Fat Zombie Goldfish by Mo O'Hara. And let's see what chapter we're on. Oh, we're on chapter 9. And what happened was, well, let's just start reading and see what's happening now. The fatal flush. Oh, that's right. Frankie. There was a guess that Tom made that Mark had flushed Frankie down the toilet. That is the zombie fish who's able to hypnotize people. Let's see what happens. We all ran to the bathroom. Okay, I'm not sure where the video stops, so we'll say, you see, fish, we heard Mark say, that's where you're going unless you help me. Then we heard water splashing. That must be Frankie, splashing around in his bag, I said. He hasn't flushed him yet. Swishy little fishy, Sammy chanted. She was still all zombie fish eyes. We have to get Mark out of there, Pradeep whispered. His phone, he said. I'll answer his phone. You take Sammy. Oh, he'll answer his phone. You'll take Sammy back home and call him from your house. Tell him you're going to tell your mom, and he'll come over to try and stop you. What will you do? Pradeep asked. I'll run in and grab the bag with Frankie in it while Mark's gone. Pradeep took Sammy downstairs. I heard the dog flap slap shut and waited behind the bedroom door. I heard the dog flap slap shut. Oh, the dog flap slap shut and waited behind the bedroom door so Mark wouldn't see me when he came out. It seemed like hours of millipede doing laps in my stomach before I heard Mark's phone ring. Mwahahaha, mwahahaha. He had changed his ringtone to this evil laugh. That was hardcore evil scientist stuff. Then I heard him speak. Yeah, moron? No, you talk, you die. He stormed out of the bathroom and slammed the door behind him. I stayed where I was. I heard him go into his bedroom and kick the goldfish bowl onto the floor. Stupid morons. Stupid trap, he grunted. He trudged down the stairs, and I heard the front door slam shut behind him. Yes, it was working. Rescue Frankie Plan Part 1. Mark on his way to Pradeep's to stop him from telling his mom Mark's evil scientist plans. Check. I just had to hope that Mark wouldn't actually kill Pradeep if his mom was there. I crossed my fingers and even my toes inside my sneakers. Rescue Frankie Plan, Part 2. Actually rescue the fish. Nearly check. I had my hand on the doorknob of the bathroom door when I heard that horrible sound again. I heard the toilet flush. I ran into the bathroom and saw the water spiraling down the toilet bowl. Frankie, no, I shouted. But he was already gone. Oh, man. So Tom went to try to save Frankie, but nope. It looks as if Frankie might have been flushed down the toilet. Well, again, that zombie fish remains alive. I wonder, have you ever owned pet fish? I've owned pet fish once or twice in my life. Usually when I was a kid, I would say maybe around 12, 13, 14 years old. And the fish, I don't think really was mine. It was probably either the family's fish or my brother's fish. And I'm trying to think where we got the fish. I think we might have just gotten the fish at the store. When a person decides to care for fish, there's a lot of supplies to get. I seem to remember things like a fish bowl and gravel and decorative plants that go into the fish bowl. I'm also reminded that fish need food, and quite often they need like pumps and filters, all kinds of filters, like charcoal filters, and then they need drops for pH and managing the pH, and they need, I don't know, anti-algae, I don't know, they need all kinds of stuff. And, and then you need to clean the fish bowl every once in a while. Yeah, I think you need to clean it maybe like weekly. And so, it's this whole thing. That's just true of having any pet. And I think fish are a kind of animal that is probably one of the most easy to care for compared to other animals. Like, for example, a dog, you don't have to take a fish out for a walk, right? And you don't have to buy a leash, and there's never a risk of the fish jumping up on another person and or barking on another person or biting another person. Fish are pretty docile, and in general, all you need to do is ensure that their environment is clean and attended, and that they have food and clean water, right? Whereas with the dog, there's like the exercise, and there's also, there's social connection that dogs really need. Dogs have this wonderful gift that they can relate to humans on a really deep level. And they crave that interaction. They crave that social interaction. It's continual, really. And, that's part of the commitment. When you're committed to caring for a dog or a cat, but mostly for dogs, there's a commitment to physical safeguarding and also emotional safeguarding. And, that just factors in to caring for a pet dog. Yeah. And then the thing about it is dogs get sick, right? And so veterinary care needs to be factored in, and those expenses. And then there's maintenance, like getting shots and getting washes, getting washed, getting their teeth cleaned, right? And there could also be medical problems. I've run into a lot of different dogs who've got cancer or orthopedic joint problems. They've got to get, I think they've got to get immunized sometimes. And then there's like the fleas, right? The fleas and the ticks that sometimes settle on them. They're so close to the ground that the ticks that are on sort of on leaves of grass tend to easily get onto dogs and their fur. So there's this whole thing about caring for dogs as a pet. It's not just momentary companionship. There's a whole package. A whole package of benefits and costs related to owning a dog. And the same is true for cats. I've owned cats before. I remember having I think at one time 4 cats. They weren't necessarily mine. They were a prior spouse that I had. It was their cats. In fact, they were rescue cats. And so, yeah, I've been in households with lots of cats before, in households with lots of dogs. And, it's unique and an enjoyable experience for a time. And then, and then it's time to expend the energy to do the maintenance and medical work to make sure it works out for the long term for both you and your pet. I don't happen to own a pet right now. And I haven't owned a pet in a long time, and maybe I ought to explain myself a little bit. I had pets growing up as a child, and that time was very valuable to me. I loved having pets. And as I grew up, I also began to see just how important it was to take good care of pets. And back then, 20 years ago, when I had my pets, even 30 years ago, the standards were, reasonably average, I guess, for taking care of pets. But today, the standards for pet care are really high. People have very high standards for how pets are taken care of. And it can cost a lot of time and energy and money to take proper care of a pet. And there are also ethical considerations. I wonder about my capability, my ability to be a good partner to a pet, honestly, and to sort of uh, ensure that their mental and emotional needs are being met too. I don't want my pet to suffer. I certainly don't want them to suffer sort of laying in my apartment like all day long while I'm at work. I don't necessarily happen to have a yard or some large, expansive space that they can play in. So, I would be concerned about their well being. It's just not as easy to take care of a pet in the city. Taking care of a pet when you're on the outskirts of town now, or if you have a big yard, like a big front yard or backyard, that's a lot easier. And I think the ethical considerations are a little more, well, they're a little more open to pet ownership when you've got some space outdoors. But in cities, like cities that I live in, the city that I live in, I don't know. I don't think it's a really great environment for a dog to hang out in. And I would be concerned for their long-term mental health. Yeah, I mean, even if I tried really hard, I'm just not home enough, really, to successfully manage a pet. I tend to be out and about. I tend to be doing stuff a lot of the time. I don't really have a lot of downtime when I'm like doing nothing and just want to pet something furry. That just doesn't happen. you know, and maybe I could see it possibly like when I'm surfing the internet or reading or perhaps doing some studying that I could care for some of the emotional needs of a pet, but I don't think it's worth the risk. And I don't think that I would have the time and mental energy to do it. And part of my determination comes as a result of watching other people care for their pets. And I've seen people care for their pets in a very sketchy way. Pretty sketchy and borderline, right? I would just not want to be under that kind of scrutiny. And I wouldn't want to have, say, the responsibility. I don't know. I think I have high standards for how I treat myself, as it relates to just my inner voice and my own behavior, about how sort of how my actions are reflected onto myself. Imagine if I added onto that standards about how to treat animals in that I own, right? Or at least that I'm partnering with, living together. I'm just not sure I could do it. I would have to, just for practical reasons, lower my standards lower than what I'm willing to do when it comes to pet ownership. Yeah. So I don't think pet ownership is for me. I would just be too concerned about not achieving the standard of care that I wanted to achieve having a cat or a dog. Now, a fish, I could probably take care of a fish. But then again, it's a risk-benefit analysis, right? It's a cost-benefit analysis. Would I gain in cherishing a relationship with a fish as much value from that I would receive from the fish? Right? I mean, would that exchange work out? Would that make sense for me to exchange my time and energy for the value that a fish brought to my life? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think that exchange, that transaction would make any sense for me. And you know what though? I think I can change my mind. You know, I I imagine that maybe if I owned a bird or a fish or a rabbit or something, I don't know, that who knows, maybe I would bond with it. I know people have relationships with chickens, right? And you know, maybe that's what I need on some level. And perhaps I do. Though, I don't know. I have seen a lot of examples of people caring for their pets, and I think one of the primary things I notice about pet ownership is are the duties that are created, right? Your obligation, you have obligations to the welfare of the pet. And you know, it's at a level that's, you know, on the level of having a child for some. Maybe not so much. Maybe it's maybe half that level. But still, I think it's a significant expenditure of time and energy and thought related to that kind of pet ownership. So I don't know. It could be that I'm exaggerating. Maybe I have unrealistic standards that I need to work on. It's true. Anyway, I think I think the choice is clear for me. My focus right now is on personal development and sort of choosing better habits, lifelong habits to help me lead my best life. And right now, I don't think it's wise for me to add any kind of pet relationship with an animal. Yeah. You know, animals already have a great deal of hardship just in general that they need to endure. There's a lot of impacts that humans are making on the natural ecosystems and on the environments that animals live in. And really, animals are struggling in their ecosystems. I mean, they always have struggled, but I'm sure especially now, there are a lot of animals that are struggling. I just read an article, or really just the title of an article, saying that there is a pod of killer whales in England, or around England, I guess in the North Sea or in the English Channel or wherever the killer whales are. That it's the last pod is dying around England, and what a tragedy that is. You know, it's sort of sad that we as humans cannot caretake our ocean waters well enough to sort of allow these fish who swim in jillion and jillion gallons worth of water. Somehow we just can't leave them alone enough. You know, and it may not even be that. It might just be the effects of climate change, right? That are disrupting the ecosystems of the killer whales in the North Sea. Again, another human-made problem, a human-made condition, right? It's funny, you know, this struggle between living things on the planet and how we affect one another. You know, it is a continuous struggle, a constant struggle. We even have a hard time keeping ourselves alive, right? All the bees are dying off as a result of the use of pesticides, perhaps. Yeah. Well, anyway, on those optimistic notes, I would like to wrap this video up. Anyway, I just want to say how much I'm thankful that you are choosing to spend time with me. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I have deep appreciation for you and your choices, and I care for you and your inner life. And I'm here anytime you'd like to reach out and connect. My interest is in having harmony within all of my relationships and peace within my relationships. And, you know, I am serious about sort of holding myself to these high standards of always being welcoming and inviting and loving And I just want you to know that. I want you to know that I am willing to accept you however you are. There is no need to change for me. I love you just the way you are. And I just want to get that point across because it's true. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful week. I'll be studying for my midterm exam coming up on Monday, and so I'll be busy. I've also got company this weekend, so again, I'm not going to be busy enough not to do anything with you if you happen to want to connect. But anyway, I'll be making myself busy this weekend. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I love you. Peace.